this time, we can have a meditative thought. Amen. We have our pledge now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are happy that we have our facility committee members, Trustee Brian Austin, Trustee Mike McLeod, and our superintendent, Dr. Martin Knox, and various staff members. At this time, if there are no objections, I'd ask for a consent approval of the agenda, if there are no objections. Okay. Hearing none, the agenda will stand as it is, with the exception, I do not feel that we would necessarily need to have an executive session tonight. It is on the agenda, but should something arise that would necessitate that, then we can come back and revisit that. Next item is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, and we can do this by consensus also, unless you want to vote. Ms. Amy, do you need a vote?
No, sir.
All right. Is there consensus for approval of the minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Consensus approval of the minutes. Now, review of facilities. Building and classroom sanitation and air quality update. Now, Dr. Martin Knox, I'm going to yield to you as to who and which staff members you want involved with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Baker. Good evening to everyone, members of the Facilities Committee and our viewing community. This evening, Mr. Samuel Myers, as well as Mr. Clyde Chan, will provide you with updates as it pertains to building and classroom sanitization and air quality update. The air quality update is a continuous dialogue as it pertains to the filters that we utilize to support the air quality in Sumter School District. So at this time, without further ado, Mr. Samuel Myers, the Executive Director of Operations, accompanied by Mr. Clyde Chan, the Director of Operations.
Good evening, and thank you. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has given a lot of time in making sure that the schools are ready. Our building services staff have worked extremely hard, along with our administrators at our schools, and given the guidance that's needed. Several weeks ago, we had an opportunity to do somewhat of a test run as far as where we are with our cleaning and our sanitation. That was during LEAP week back in August. And from that point, we took some time to review some of the things that we had done and some of the adjustments that were needed. And we did that in grand style, because as we look throughout the buildings, we've seen that our administrators have given guidance to our building services staff to work diligently in making sure that the buildings are ready. Some of the things that we've done, I will share some of those aspects of some of the things we provided. I'm going to allow Mr. Chan to talk about some of the checklists that we have that would be appropriate for the things that we've done. Some of the things that we've shared with our building services staff and administrators, we provided them with electrostatic sprayers. Gives an opportunity after the cleaning has been done to disinfect. That is a unit that all buildings have access to, and we just received the second round of those sprayers, and each school should have at least 2 of those units by the end of the week. We have also made sure that we provided several wall mounts for hand sanitizers. Those objects will be installed within the week. We've also applied bottle fillers that will be attached to all of our water fountains. It keeps everyone safe in reference to making sure that we're not having to drink from a water fountain. On each Wednesday, there is a deep cleaning process that takes place. Building services staff will go in detail, a more in-depth cleaning in all of the rooms and restrooms and office areas. They want to make sure those things are on point. Additionally, the cleaning supplies that we have purchased, all of those items are EPA certified, and all of those items are known to kill the COVID-19 virus, and that's what we were looking for, and we wanted to make sure we could keep all of that in perspective and everything that we were using at that time. Or prior to that, we've tried to remove those, and we're still doing that as we speak. I'm going to allow Mr. Chan to talk about the cleaning restroom checklist and the classrooms as well.
Mr. Myers and I, we initially went out to just survey and to monitor what was being done. And as we went in, we saw that which was done across the district as a whole. And everyone seemed to be conforming to what we mandated them to do. There are sanitation methods in which we've implemented, and everyone seems to be following the protocol. And we're doing whatever we can. Some of the restrooms are, at this point, has been restricted for use until the students return. But they are also kept clean and ready for usage. And really and truly, we're really pleased with our custodial staff for stepping up and doing what they need to do.
Something that we will be initiating near the end of the week and into next week, we will be conducting building inspections. We will be going to each of the schools, taking a look at some of the cleaning procedures that have taken place, and offering suggestions and following the lead of the principals, because we want our principals to make sure that they're in the mix with the way things should be at their schools, because they're the head of that campus. And they have done an exceptional job of that, and I think it shows that some of them have taken their time to show their building services staff the proper procedures and things that they would want to see within their school. So these are just some of the things that we've done to enhance the cleaning and the sanitization of those buildings and rooms at the various schools and facilities.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Austin, Mr. McLeod, questions?
I don't have any at this time.
Actually, I do have a question. Is this a checklist that each one of the schools go through when they're doing their deep cleaning, or this is something that they use on a daily basis?
It's it's an item that they use all the time. It could be used during deep cleaning as well as throughout the day, throughout the week.
And this is something that is sent to your staff or Mr. Chan, or who keeps the record of this?
That in itself is kept basically at the schools. When we do our inspections beginning the end of this week and into next week, it will be something that we will take a look at and giving more guidelines as to how we could better utilize it as well.
And may I also add, this is a checklist that has been revised, and it actually is comprised of previous checklists that was utilized by our building service staff, but it also encompasses those requirements that we've noted as it pertains to COVID-19. So as you all know, that we've adjusted the way in which we do things because COVID-19 is unique. And so we want to make sure that our buildings are safe for our students and our staff and visitors when they arrive at the building. So this is an updated, modernized checklist.
Mr. Pine?
So this checklist is what's going on now or what will be going on when we have students back in the building?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's already going on. Is there and you might have said this a minute ago, this checklist, they sign off over there to the right, those columns, is that what that is for? When they do, is that what that is?
Yes.
Initial
Correct.
and the time that they do it, I guess? Okay. Fine.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Myers. And I have to apologize, I can't see that checklist. But I know one thing that we frequently run into is that our soap dispensers are not always charged. And to me, that needs to be a daily thing, and I guess that's on the list. The other thing, have we added additional hand sanitizers in the buildings? And where do we locate those additional hand sanitizers?
Additional hand sanitizers were provided to the schools, and we basically left that up to the principals as to where they wanted to, because they would know their high traffic areas. But we just left that up to them. As far as the soap dispensers, we just sent out an additional supply of soap to recharge each one of those areas, and they have enough that we can get started, and we'll try to continue to keep more in place as well.
Okay. At our last board meeting, there was some discussion about, and this may not be the correct term, the RDA or the filters, and I believe you reported that we use 8.
Yes.
And there was some discussion about additional filtration devices. And again, I may not be using the correct terminology, that one of the board members to share some information about. Are we as a district going to take a look at maybe purchasing those, or are we doing some research on it, or where do we stand with that?
Okay. We've done some extensive research. As a matter of fact, that's going to, once we conclude this piece of it, we can move right into that section of it. Dr. Martin, you want to share something about that to get us started, or do you want to go right into it?
We can go right into the air quality update, and just to answer your question, Dr. Baker, good question. Whenever there's an opportunity for us to improve the practices that we engage in, we always look and compare ourselves, not just to what we've been doing and what we do, but what others are doing as well. So I've spent countless hours contacting other superintendents, not just here in South Carolina, but around the nation, in terms of the filtration systems that they use at their schools, in their school districts. Actually, right before this meeting began, I had a call back from someone who checked with their facilities folks to find out what it was that they were using. So while we were doing that type of research, we also did the research based on the printed literature that exists nationwide. So we've been looking at it. So we have some information that, as Mr. Meyer said, will be presented in a moment when we begin to do the air filtration presentation. So yes, we've done the work, we've done the homework, and we will continue to do the work. And it's kind of like a mixed bag of information we've gleaned. I don't want to go into it because then there's no need for Mr. Myers to do his presentation. So I'm gonna put my mask back on.
Did you say y'all already have started going in to make sure these things are happening, or y'all will be going in?
We've been going in at different times. We're going to make it a more concentrated effort to get in there and to do that. Some principals have asked us to come out and take a look at their buildings.
Is it just the two of you going out, or?
No, we've got a team of persons. Mr. Chan and I will be two of the ones who will go out.
Okay.
Yes.
And so may I add to that as well? Whenever staff visits buildings, we also look at it as well. We don't look at it from the same lens that those individuals do, but the staff has been out to buildings, and one of the things we do is debrief just to see if there's anything we need to follow up on. But we continue to encourage our staff to let us know when they need additional support with whatever it may be in terms of the cleaning of the facility or changing of materials or whatever it may be. So while we've conducted multiple school visits, whenever we're in the building, not only are we looking at instructional practices, but we're looking at the physical environment as well.
Any other questions on the classroom sanitation?
Good.
Okay. All right. Dr. Martin, you want to proceed, or Mr. Myers, or whomever?
So, Ms. Hanson, if you can go to the next slide. So Mr. Myers will follow up Dr. Baker with some of the responses to the question that you provided. So is Jennifer Clemens with you?
Yes, Jennifer.
So I would ask that Ms. Miller is also present because she will be presenting with Mr. Myers and Mr. Chan.
Mr. Chamberlain. You can do that next slide. What you're seeing before you are just some definitions that came initially. Mr. Chan is going to give us a breakdown of the different filters, and we have samples of the ones that we're going to use. Go ahead, Mr. Chan.
As you see in the presentation, there are 3 levels of filtration. There is, the term is MERV, and it starts at 8, which is the lower level, 11, and then 13. What we standardly use and across many districts is the MERV 8, which we use in our school district. You can see the features of each one of the components. There are pros and cons about each one of them that are vital to the operation of the HVAC system that are in the classrooms. I called 3 school districts from yesterday, today, and trying to find out where they are concerning what method they use and what kind of filtration they use. And it varied tremendously. School districts that I called was Pickens County, Georgetown County, Horry County. And then of course, Mr. Myers just chimed in on Richland County also. So there's a variability, or there's a lot of different methods they're using, but there are some things that are common that is very vital to trying to keep air filtration at its best.
As we move forward, we're going to take a look at an air purifier, and we will take a look at a bipolar ionization called I-Wave R. We have some pros and cons. As we take a look at our higher MERV rating filters, our higher rating filters being 13 or 14 collects more particles. The cons, restricted airflow, and it could damage the compressors that are on the units. Some of the other counties and school districts that are using the higher MERV rated filters, they are using some of the ones that are 13 and 14. However, they applied that at the time that they were building their new units. They applied it to a brand new unit, so the filter itself worked extremely well with that particular unit. When we went to air purification, there's no installation, controls odor, and it utilizes a HEPA filter, but it does not kill germs. When we talk about the bipolar ionization, it's an object that attaches to the unit itself. It's designed to kill mold, bacteria, and viruses, reduces allergens, reduces odors, and it's self-cleaning. And there is installation required. Ms. Miller?
Right, good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. We certainly are not putting a cost on the safety of our staff and our children, but we did want to document what the cost was for these various options. For the bipolar ionization, we're using a calculation of 1,200 units, and they are at $350 each, and that equates to $453,600. That includes tax. Then for the air purification option, again, 1,200 units, They are $320 each, and that equates to $414,720. Again, that includes tax. And then just to give you an example of filters, we certainly have many different sizes of filters depending on the specific school and the units at each school. But for this example, I'm just using a 20 by 30 by 1 for the calculation, and I have the 3 different MERV levels listed there. The MERV levels start below the 8, but just for our comparison, we are using the 8, 11, and 13. But for the MERV 8, they're approximately $5 each for a filter. For a MERV 11, it's approximately $13 each, and then for a MERV 13, it's approximately $22 each. And then as we move to the next slide, just to talk about the funding, for equipment and installation with a useful life greater than 1 year, we can purchase that with bond money. However, for a filter, that has to be replaced monthly, and the higher the MERV rating, those have to be replaced even more often, and those must be purchased with our ongoing operating revenue from the general fund. We cannot use bond funding for that. And back to Mr. Myers to give an intro, or to Mr. Chan maybe, for a short video.
Okay, is that gonna play or?
Yes. Turn it volume.
And it may be that the sound is not gonna work on,
While,
setting.
while there is, a visual presentation, let me share with you what this gentleman is saying. He is introducing the iWave bipolar ionizer, and he's describing what the unit does and how it is installed. The ionizer emits 2 poles, a positive and a negative charge, that strikes against particles that are in the air. And that, like for example, viruses, it will dehydrate, or it will hydrate rather, the virus cells that are in the air, and whereby killing any virus that is in the air. With particles, what it does, it charges the particles with a positive and a negative ion, which makes it very weighty, that will allow the return to pull those particles into the filters. Once the room is cleaned, and once the air quality has risen, then the filters can go back to its normal interval of changing. But for the first time, to clear the air, it has to be used, the filters have to be changed quite frequently. Many school districts have used this. In fact, finding out, Georgetown, they have gone ahead and blanketed their school with this device. Also, the largest school district in Georgia, Gwinnett County School District, they have blanketed their entire school district with this device. And of course, Pickens, they have done nothing, but they recommend. I spoke with the director, and he said if we have a choice, when I say they did nothing, they introduced more fresh air into the classrooms. But he said if I was to do anything, it would be the bipolar ionizer, because it is most effective from the technical point of view.
Mr. Austin, Mr. McLeod?
Yes, sir. The ionizer, how many square feet will it clean?
It goes by the tons, the size of the unit.
Okay.
There are actually 3 grades of them.
So is it attached to the existing air system, HVAC system, or is it a standalone system, or how is it?
Okay, it sits right behind the air filter.
Okay,
and it's got a magnet on it, it sits right there.
So it charges the air as it comes through the filter?
Correct, and there are basically two wires that hook to the relay of the circulating fan.
Okay.
And as long as the circulating fan is running, it keeps charging the air. You can either do that on the load side, which would be intervals when the fan is running, or you can do it on the line side so that it runs continuously.
So viruses that get trapped in the filter as it is pulling it through will not reach the ionizer, but still be on the surface of the filter.
When they pull through, what happens, the air conditioning system goes through, pulls it through the return, and then it compresses the air, through the coils and the compressor, and then it sends it back into the supply. When it goes back into the supply, if untreated, the air quality as far as temperature changes, but the contents doesn't change.
Was that, do we still use the same filter in front of it that we use now?
Yes.
So if that filter traps the virus, then it doesn't make it to the ionizer?
Well, it goes through the filters. It goes through the filters.
Okay.
Viruses, smoke, whatever, pollutants.
Using the R8,
Well, yes.
the MERV 8.
That's correct.
Because if you go to MERV 13 and the ionizer, you're kind of be perfectly going to catch the virus, correct?
That's correct, but
That's just me thinking.
the higher the MERV value is, the more restrictive the filter
Right.
becomes. And most of our air conditioned systems that are in our school district are not equipped to handle.
And I would imagine that puts a lot more strain on the unit as it's
Yes,
trying
sir.
to pull air through
Right.
that higher rating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Dawson?
What is the turnaround time for having the bipolar iron installation? I see it says 30 minutes per unit, but with the number of schools and the systems that it would have to be attached to, what is the turnaround time to get that done prior to, for instance, fitting in our building?
The turnaround time to get them in the building.
Installed.
It's about ordering them.
Well, we would have to order those units, and from some of the companies that we made contact with, they do have those in supply, and once we get them in, our technicians would take about 30 minutes per unit to install that apparatus, and we move from there.
And just one follow-up question. I heard Mr. Chance spoke higher MERV rating for the filters that some of our HVAC units are not equipped for that. We won't have any issues with our current HVAC units if we install these bipolar ionization units, correct?
There'll be no effects, negative effects by installing the ionizers.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Ms. Miller, the figure 1,200 now, that was figuring an ionizer for every classroom? Or
Yes, sir, that was
how
to
we
ensure
handle it?
classes had.
All right, and obviously, if we go with something like this, you're going to have to issue a bid, correct?
Sorry, what was that last
Will
part?
you will have to issue a bid for this, would you not?
We could actually have this fall under the emergency procurement related to COVID-19. We have forms that the state is allowing us to use for all our COVID-19 expenditures.
Good, thank you.
And I'll have to put it out for bid.
Going back to the MERV value, most of our units are not equipped to have something above an 8. And I know things have been updated and since I have not been involved with it. So we would need to stick with the 8 because if we go higher, we're going to damage the compressors and create a bigger expense for us. I just wanted to be sure everybody understood the connection there. Mr. McLeod?
I know we don't have an air unit for each classroom, but is there a return in each classroom to put this in? Or is there some classrooms that just has a vent and no return? Because if so, then it's not drawing out of that classroom. And I'm just thinking across the district now.
Correct. 85% of our air conditioned system are basically wall hung units, so they're individualized for classrooms.
Okay.
So that one piece, anywhere there's a return, this device is installed. Anywhere air is being modified, and there may be multiple areas, but classrooms, are controlled, and there are returns in every classroom. The return jurisdict the temperature in the classroom, the thermostat setting. So even though there may be one unit for 4 or 5 classrooms, there's a return in every classroom.
Across the district.
Across the district, that's correct.
Assume that's our return, then, the double.
Mr. Austin?
Yes.
And I also heard early in the presentation, with thinking that they're just increasing fresh air to their classrooms. That is still an option for the majority of our buildings, if I'm not correct, right? For we can open windows, we can open doors, continue to use the MERV heat filters, and if we add the bipolar ionization system to our unit as a way to make sure we're increasing cleaner air, I guess, into our classrooms or into our buildings, correct?
Mr. Austin, let me chime in on this. We also have a program in place for controlling the air-conditioned units that has the ability to change the characteristics and performance of that particular unit in a classroom. And there is a device called a green wheel that is in every one of those units that allow a certain percentage of indoor, outdoor air quality to infiltrate the classroom. That window could be opened to increase the level of outdoor air coming in with modifying the program. And that in that way you wouldn't have to open up a classroom window, and there may be classrooms that do not have windows or may not have the ability to open a window. They may be just a window frame, but without an access to open it. But we can change the quality of air coming in or the quantity of air coming in.
This may be a follow-up question for Dr. Martin. Has there been any guidance from the Department of Ed concerning the doors to classrooms being open? I know that at one point it was a security issue with having the classroom doors open. Has there been any guidance from the Department of Ed concerning having classroom doors open? I can see pros and cons to having the classroom door open outside of security as well. If you have a person in the hallway that may be carrying the virus with them, and you have the classroom door open, now that person walks past the classroom and enters into that classroom. But it's some type of guidance that may have been issued already.
Mr. Austin, we've looked at that at different times as far as the security piece that you mentioned initially. Opening doors many times with the teachers being the only one in there at the time and wearing may not have their mask on, and it gives an opportunity for that teacher to re-engage with their masks as they may be coming in. There hasn't been much guidance, or we have not seen much guidance from the State Department in reference to that. But there have been some different kinds of things as far as DHEC has indicated along that line. So we try to make sure we can do things in a procedural process as far as keeping everybody safe. Things have changed. We've adjusted some of the ways we operate, and we'll continue to monitor that to see what is going to be the best way to do that. So we're constantly looking at that.
You good, Mr. Austin?
Yes, sir.
All right,
Like, I got one. Is the ionized, and I think it's a great idea, is this similar to what was installed a few years back into some of the football locker rooms? And I think that was to help control odor, staff and stuff like that. Is it a similar product?
That was more with the humidifier
Was
in
it
many instances.
it's more like a dehumidifier to get rid of the moisture?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
But that's one good feature about the ionizer, it will,
To help control it.
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Austin, Ms. McLeod, this committee will need to carry some recommendations back to our board.
Yes.
So I want to yield to Dr. Martin Knox, Mr. Myers, and Mr. Chan. How do y'all feel about this? What is your position?
So I think the first thing is to make sure that our staff and our students are safe. And I also need to add a component to it to make sure that we're not extending ourselves and we are putting something into our system, as you mentioned previously, that could cause the systems to deteriorate, because then that's a bigger cost implication to this. Knowing that we have shifted our practice and we are now changing filters once a month now as opposed to one every 6 months, and in some cases we found a little longer. I think that the safest way is the ionization device that we can put on the filters for them to regulate the air, regulate the bacteria, regulate the germs. And if you look at some of the research, I think it helps support what we're trying to do, and that's to make sure that the germs are minimized in our schools. While we know that nothing is guaranteed to be 100%, that's as close as we can get to that. And like Mr. Chan mentioned earlier, we have, and like I've mentioned earlier, we have had dialogue. I've talked to someone as far as Oregon, who's a colleague of mine who's out in Oregon. I've talked to those in Maryland. I've talked to someone in Texas. So I've had the dialogue about what they're using. And there is no one system that all school districts are using. Some of them have upgraded their I'm out of my lane. Yes, those, the HVAC units. Just a lost word, not out of my lane. They've replaced their HVAC units because they've done major construction on their buildings. And so they've upgraded the machines to be able to be MERV compatible. While we're not in a position to do that at this particular point in time, again, the best route and the safest route for our children and for our staff is to go with the ionization device that we can mount on the HVAC unit. The other thing that I would like to remind us of is also that as we are moving forward, the cost implications, it's going to have to come from the operating budget. And so we would have to make sure that we are monitoring our spending so that we can support this effort and initiative moving forward. So that would be my recommendation, and I don't know if you two agree with me because we haven't discussed that.
One of the things that I'd like to just suggest is simply this. I would like to suggest having a professional company come in and do an air analyzing of a classroom that is currently being used, and then install the ionizer, and then within 48 hours have them come back and test that area to determine what it's doing. And in that way, we will know whether it is effectively handling the air quality control in that classroom.
So I like that idea, because what we would need to do if we took that approach, and thank you for that, Mr. Chan, I would recommend us doing an elementary, a middle, and a high, and all at different sizes, because I know that the number of individuals who are within a building also impacts the air and the quality of the air that we breathe and all those other factors. So I would like to pick multiple schools to be able to field this approach, if that's what we're going to do. And I don't have a problem with us doing that either.
It's a good idea.
Mr. Austin, Mr. McLeod, how you feel about that?
Absolutely love that idea. My question, I guess, is for Ms. Miller. I know in the presentation it said that we could use bond funds for ionization equipment. As far as this person or persons that does the air quality testing, would that come from our general operating funds, or would that come from the bond funds as well?
We'll have to do a little research on that, Mr. Alston. I don't have the answer off the top of my head, as far as the service to be conducted on that. But I would think, in my mind, it would be similar to our roofing engineers. But I will get back to the board on that.
Thank you.
Good.
You good? Okay. Dr. Martinox, you hit on something just a second ago, and I wanted to raise a question going back to the changing of the filters. The inside filters are the responsibility of our custodial building services staff, correct?
Yes.
And outside filters are district responsibility.
Yes.
How do we monitor or check and keep track? And I'll be perfectly honest with you, after we had this discussion at our last board meeting, I think we had a good many teachers watching virtually, some pictures were sent on the dates of those filters.
Yes.
I know one was February of 2018. Another one was March of 2019. And you hit that some of them are beyond. How widespread is that problem in our district?
So I can only speak to those that were reported. Some of them, it goes back to the question about when we do school visits, it comes up and because I asked the question, how are we looking with filters and what does it, I was at school about 2 weeks ago and I asked if the filter been changed and they said yes. And I didn't follow up to see whether it had been changed and when it had been changed. I knew it was changed when I was there. I think we've had some reports of some filters that had not been changed when we began this process. And so some of the teachers said, I know mine hasn't been changed because there's an indicator on the filter from the previous building service staff. And so I don't know if it as a result of staff being out and there was no checks and balances in terms of the wind, but that's something that we're tightening up as well now.
Right.
And so when Mr. Chan and Mr. Myers conduct their school visits, that is going to be a conversation for us to make sure we look at those. Because again, now, while it is a concern that filters hadn't been changed, it is something that has to occur at this particular point in time. And it needs to occur just like we're brushing our teeth, because it does impact the safety of our children. So I'm glad they were sending pictures or what have you, but again, if you could share with me where those took place, because now we need to find out why they had been placed and to get them replaced immediately. I didn't get any, I don't know if you guys did, but I knew I had some prior to the meeting. When I asked. There was actually a room that I went in, and there was a water issue, and I could feel, I have allergies to certain things. I was like, does the filter been changed? And that's how that process began with us changing the filter. And so we had to have the conversation when I called Mr. Myers to say, why hasn't this occurred? So we do follow up, and we will be following up. At some point, it has not been a regular routine, but it is now.
Now, one other question, Mr. Myers. When our building service folks put in those filters, do they put the date on them?
Yes, they are.
So they've got.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's how we knew.
Right.
yeah. And I was just questioning if they're still doing that. I knew
Yeah.
that was what had been done in the past, and I was just wondering if they're still doing that.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
And some of them are going as far as not just the date, but their initials and some other signs and indicators that I was here. And that person wasn't in the building anymore, so it's like, it hasn't been changed since they were here. Yes.
And you're right, the staff's changed and, you know, but as you pointed out, the situation we're facing now, and that's gonna become a priority.
It
Is a priority.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on, as far as building, classroom sanitation, air quality update?
No,
Good. All right. Causal Park Early Childhood Center Building Review. Dr. Martinox.
So, again, good evening. We are actually conducting our facilities meeting here at the Croswell Center as a result of future plans of relocating a program here. Not only is the program to support the needs of our children, the whole child, but it's also to provide support to our community, the community in which it serves. So today, Mr. Myers, Mr. Chan, Dr. Hafner, and the principal of our Sumter Academy of Support and Intervention are joining us via Zoom, and they will have additional details as it relates to the future plans of this facility. So at this particular point in time, Mr. Myers, would you like to?
Dr. Hafner's going to start.
Oh, okay. Dr. Hafner?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Myers stated you're slated to begin the discussion about the visits and the plans.
That is fine. I know that, there are going to be questions about programming that, facilities members may have, but I know that Mr. Myers was going to speak to you all about the OSF process and where we are within that process and the modifications that need to be made.
We just received a building permit from OSF, and we're slated to begin with our bidding process. We do have, we're waiting on the plans from Mr. Shelley. He will share that with us, and we will go ahead and put out our bids to begin the process. As we're taking a look at the plans itself, we have 3 major areas slated to be modified on the plans itself. With the main entrance, they will modify the main entrance itself, where they will secure the area so that as a person is entering the building, they just don't walk right into the building. They would have to buzz in one time and then buzz in a second time. Once the receptionist identifies who it is, then that person would be allowed to come forward and be escorted to where they need to go. Another area that will be modified, as we took the tour, there's a section that has 2 external restrooms that only occupy just 1 person per restroom. The area itself will be modified to accommodate approximately 5 persons per restroom, 1 for male, 1 for female. And that area will be modified to address those needs. There will be some slight modifications within the cafe area, where we would remove some of the standing wall units. Those areas would be removed in order to give more space to that area. As we move to the section where there will be more modifications for restrooms, as it stands right now. On the far end of the building, we would have to modify the restrooms where they would go inside the classroom, and it extends within where 2 different walls will be removed to identify a male restroom and a female restroom. Teachers will be able to see who's going in one at a time, and there would be a glass partition where they could see, and they could see from one classroom to the next. So 2 classrooms would be able to occupy those restrooms at that time. And you would have basically 4 classrooms that will be occupying those restrooms.
Is that down here where the restroom butts up to the storage room?
Yes,
So that storage room will become another restroom?
that's correct, yes.
And they will be gang style restrooms to
Yes.
accommodate at least 5.
That is correct. There will be some minor modifications in the area where you see the playground. We will be adding exiting fencing to make sure that there's an exit and an entrance for a walkthrough for an individual. There will also be a sidewalk added to get from one point to the next that leads you out to where the basketball courts will be. Haven't come up with the dimensions of that yet, but it will be right out near where the playground is right now. And those are some of the significant adjustments that we will make to the building. There's not much that needs to be done as far as making sure that the restrooms are accommodating for the number of students that we may have in the building.
And so when we speak of some of the modifications, as we've explained or Dr. Hafner has shared in many of the presentations, the facility will be multi-purpose to meet the needs of our students from Sumter Academy of Support and Intervention, but also to meet the needs of our students during the summer. It is our plan and our goal to have support for our smallest learner during the summertime so that we can provide them with ongoing support while school is out for the summer, and hopefully to accelerate some of the deficits as we look at our kindergarten readiness assessment data. We know that many of our students need additional support. So during the summer, we plan to bring in smaller learners, and so that's why some of the modifications that you've seen should not be totally removed, but instead modified so that our largest learners could use them as well. So the building we walked through several times just to make sure we're maximizing the space and providing wraparound services not only for our students but for our community as a whole. Again, Dr. Hafner has spoken several times about the possibilities of providing GED programs here in the building while providing supports to our families who speak English as a second language by having a recruiter here in the building, an office for our SRO who will be actively engaged not only just here in the school but in the community as well. A social worker, a nurse, just so we can make sure that our students and our community are also healthy as we're moving forward. So the plan is not just, again, to find a holding cell, shall I say, and I'll use that term kind of loosely, for our students, but it is really to design support for the community in which we serve. When we talk about the community partnership, this is what our ideal offerings would look like when it comes to what we plan to do here at Croswell. I would like to then go into the naming of the facility because that was a conversation that we began to have at the last board meeting. And although we had surveyed our staff here at the Sumter Academy of Support Intervention, we did not have open dialogue with the possibility of incorporating the name because there's some historical information that we did not have readily available to us. So I'd like to thank Dr. Baker for sharing that information and moving forward. And I know we need to take a recommendation back. As we have named our program the Sumter Academy for Support and Intervention, I'd like to, and you can tell me if I'm out of order.
No.
Okay. I would like to take the recommendation that was discussed the other day to add it to the title unless there are some other names that we can put on the table. But I would like to honor the historical piece and call it the Sumter Academy of Support and Intervention at Croswell Park or at Croswell Drive. And so I guess that would need to be a discussion we have here, and then we take a recommendation back to the board. And so Mr. Boone and Dr. Hafner, were there any other ideas that you all may have that you'd like to put on the table as we speak?
I've just been thinking about not only the academic supports that we are trying to afford to our alternative placement students, but again, just reiterating the services and supports that we're trying to make available for individuals within our community who may want to reach out for services
as you mentioned, like maybe English language learner courses or GED courses, or, yeah, the recruiter that would be on site, and just making some of those things available even after the school hours, so that some of our students who have home-based services can come receive special services in this building as well.
Mr. Austin?
I like the idea of adding the at Crossroads Park or Crossroads Drive to the side of the historical piece. And I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes when I say this, and I see the galleries on here, but I think that the piece that's missing or that's being lost in the community is that we're moving the Worthington program, and that's it. A piece about the community support that's going to be a part of this program is a piece that I haven't seen the community really embrace yet, and I don't know if that's just because they're stuck on the Worthington move. We could do some more, I guess, community outreach or marketing to let the community know that this is a community project and not just an alternative education program that's being.
And I think you're absolutely correct. When you look at the students we service, it's really not a community because kids come from all over. And so while I respect and appreciate your input, I just want you to know that I've had conversations today, and I continue to have conversations with representatives from the community, because it truly is about community schooling while we're looking at this approach. So I totally agree with what it is that you shared. And Dr. Hafner had led this work as well. And I believe that person or that thing called COVID has interrupted a lot of what we had planned to do, particularly as it pertains to Mr. Boone, getting the opportunity to introduce himself to the community, which that will be in play very soon. But, just really opening our doors and embracing our community and having our community embrace us as well.
Where will the students be until the building is complete?
So right now they're virtual with all the rest of our students. When we begin the transition, they will transition to their home schools. So we don't have any students assigned at this particular point in time. However, as we're moving forward, we're using a part of the building, and then we will shift so there is space that can be utilized if we have a case where we have students, but right now they're still working in a virtual capacity.
But do we have a estimated time that, I know we gotta get the bids and everything first, but that we would like to see it finished, anticipate seeing it, where we can occupy it?
Our hope is that we can have this completed by the first of the year or sooner. And that's why we're working to go ahead and get those bids out so we can get this process started.
And I think with the work that we have put in place already with the virtual piece and what we're planning to do with the Apex Lab and some of those other features that we know will exist here, we'll be able to accommodate children, particularly in the lab space, and because they have their own devices, we can utilize that as well. So they can still, even in a remote capacity, zoom in, shall I say, not using the program Zoom, but tune in to instruction as it's taking place, even in the homeschool from a virtual capacity, if the need should arise for us to do that.
All right, I have a few questions, I guess some for Dr. Hafner and some for Mr. Myers. You said we got our building permit from OSF. When did we get that? Just in the last few days?
Last few days, yes.
And so now Mr. Shelley has to go ahead, draw the plans, and he'll be submitting them to OSF, correct?
He'll be sharing those with Dee Cook, our procurement coordinator. She will get that out.
Okay, and once we get those plans in, how long do you think it's going to take OSF to give us approval? I mean, is anybody having contact, are they backed up, or has COVID impacted what? They stay backed up usually.
That's going to be a tough call at this moment. We've been in constant contact with OSF, and once the work gets started, we're going to follow the normal procedures and alerting them and letting the persons contact them that needs. Mr. Shelley will be making contact with them. So we'll follow the normal procedures as we would with any other project.
And to answer, if they have been backed up because of COVID, they've not been doing the work, and that's why this has kind of been slowed down just a little because of COVID.
Yeah, and I appreciate your optimism, Mr. Myers, at the first of the year, but now that Santa Claus is a little bit to you. Because so many things are out of our control as a school
Yes, that's right.
district. So that kind of, but hey, maybe that'll happen. Okay, don't happen.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Martinos alluded to the virtual aspect of how we are dealing with our current kids in the alternative program. And I have several questions about that. It's my understanding, and correct me if this is wrong, that all of our kids who were currently assigned to our alternative program were placed back at their home schools on their home school teachers' rosters. And that our home school teachers are teaching those kids, and our alternative school teachers are monitoring, assisting, but they're not actually teaching our kids. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and Dr. Martin, if you want to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we just felt like the students had already been out, separated from their regular peers for such a long period of time, that if we could get them into their regular class rosters back at their home schools, the staff here divvied up the list of students, and they are to check on them regularly, daily, and go into those classrooms as they're listed as a guardian in the classrooms, the Google Classroom. So they can go in, monitor the work, and then assist the students with the work either during that same time or at another time later in the day. But they are definitely to make contact, keep a log. They're turning those logs in to Mr. Boone of the contact that they are making. And if there is a situation where there's no number or something that they're not working, they are to reach out to the teacher of that student or that class and see if they are, either they've been active in the classes they're supposed to, how are they making contact with that student, and gather that information from the teacher whose roster that they're on, so that they can make physical contact with them in their homes, by calling the house or talking to the parent or emailing or something of that nature.
All right, and you hit on something that I was going to ask also. You said they were tagging them as guardians. So they would have access to the Google Classroom.
Yes, sir.
That's for middle and high school. We got middle and high school kids in the alternative program. Now, is that consistent? Because, again, this may not be correct information, but I'm getting feedback from teachers that say that it is not consistent. Some schools and teachers have made them co-teachers, which means they've got access to grades, assignments, but it would be all the other kids on that roster too, not just our alternative kids. Some schools have made them guardians, and some schools teachers have just issued an invitation to join. So my concern is that how are we being consistent so our alternative teachers can do the best job with assisting those kids?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And Dr. McLeod may be able to specify a little bit more, but my understanding is that Ms. Donna Barth-Peter from last week was going in and making them a guardian in each of those courses so that they couldn't necessarily alter any other students' work or anything like that, but only monitor and assist the students that they're responsible for from the alternative placement.
Yeah, I know it's a complicated process, but I was just curious if we're being consistent across the board with all of our schools and how we're doing that.
I will certainly double check on that for you.
Yeah, and the other thing now, do we have a firm number of how many kids we're serving?
Yes, sir. 48.
48, okay, very good. One other question, in terms of classrooms in this building, thank you for the tour, we really appreciate that. How many, and I understand we only using one half of the building until plans are approved and things of that nature, but after everything is approved, how many actual classrooms will we have?
Let me say this for just a moment. Initially, we thought that we would be able to utilize a co-teaching model and have multiple, like an English language arts teacher and a classroom with a social studies teacher. That was pre-COVID, that was our concept pre-COVID. And as a result of that, what we're having to do is allow more space on the left-hand wing of the building to be utilized during the day by the Sumter Academy for Support and Intervention staff. And that would still allow those spaces to be utilized as parent resources and other student resources at other times of the day. But then that does still leave two that are purely community spaces available. And I'm pointing, and I'm in a Zoom with you, but I'm pointing down the hall. But overall, that would give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13 actual classrooms. 10 classrooms. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
We were making sure we could find lab space and special needs spaces within the building. And as you know, there are great spaces in this building. We just are trying to utilize the best we can to serve our alternative placement students and our community.
And that's what I was driving at too, is would we have enough space left to do the things we want to do through the community partnerships?
I believe that we do. Especially if we rotate the times where we have those ELL classes and GED courses and things after our alternative placement students are gone for the day. But we still will have space available during the day guaranteed for some of those services.
Good.
Because I know some members, some other students in some members of the community they'll need to have access during daytime and after hours.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. McLeod, Mr. Austin?
I was just wondering concerns about the co-teaching and combining the classes, especially with the different behavioral or background issues that these kids might come to this program, having them in the same classroom, that number of students in the classroom.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Austin. I was just thinking that we kind of address that because we realize we can't have that many people in the class. We're spread now.
You guys are doing great.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Thank you.
The GED idea, and this, I guess, is really getting off of facilities, but who would we be focusing on as far as that route?
So the efforts that we had discussed is really partnering with adult ed and looking at our more mature learners. Many who may have decided not to drop out at some point in time for reasons that we can't even probably imagine,
Right.
but just giving them the opportunity to come back and to get their high school diploma. So
It's not the students that would actually be involved in the program unless they decide, okay, I'm out.
that is correct, and that would be adult ed.
Okay.
And so we would have those students connect with adult ed with the staff there.
Okay.
But we're looking to target those who may have been out of school for an extensive period of time.
Ultimately, we would like for all of them to
Absolutely,
graduate with a high school diploma.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay? Ms. Dawson, you good? All right. Okay. Any other information, Dr. Martin Knox, that you need to share, or any of your staff need to share before we go to looking at some recommendations?
No, sir, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Can we have some discussion now about recommendations that we'll carry back to our board? Mr. Austin?
I like the idea of taking back the full board, the use of bond funds for the bipolar organization. And to take back to the board the Sumter Academy for supporting interventions at Croswell. I don't know if we were gonna say Croswell Park. I think it's Croswell Park is the name of the community. Taking that back to the full board.
Okay. All right.
I agree with that. I think that maybe the board, some of the board members might want to discuss maybe shortening that. That's what I say.
Well, what we'll do is we'll just list it as name and then we can get into dialogue. Okay. All right. And the bipolar organization. What else? Dr. Martin Knox.
I think those were the two big rocks.
Those are the two big ones. All right. And this thing, you get all this in your minutes and your notes.
And did we ever check to make sure that all the HVAC units were operating correct? I know we discussed that last Monday.
We did,
They're all working properly.
yes.
Show all of them.
To our knowledge,
So, yeah, to our knowledge.
to our knowledge.
All right. Everyone good with those two main recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That brings us down to, unless someone else has something to contribute, that brings us down to the close of our meeting. Everybody good?
Good.
All right. I want to thank Dr. Martin Knox for sharing with us tonight, the staff present here and the staff present virtually. We appreciate all that you do and thank you for giving us this information. And we'll look forward to carrying these recommendations before our entire board. And Mr. Myers, you can kind of keep us posted on the progress.
All right.
It's a time monster, I know, but anyway, like I say, so much of it is, and we understand that, it's out of our hands as a district. But y'all are working diligently to do what you need to do to get it moved on through. All right. If there are no other comments, questions, concerns, then we'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you.